I'm sorry, Dad, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. You're on mute.
Welcome, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guests. Art is the expression or application of human creative skill, imaginations. Typically, it is in the visual form, such as painting, sculptures, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. Some artists sketch with chalk, others with graphite, some with paints, oils, and watercolors. Still others carve wood, stones, or maybe use steel and plastics as their art form. My preference is photography. It is an art that uses less manual dexterity than some of these other arts, but still requires the most important tool an artist needs to have: the mind, the imagination. How do you create artistic photographs? There are some guidelines that can guide even a novice to quality photographs. Now, I may be talking to an audience who are already great photographers, but I'm going to tell you my view of what I've learned over the last many years as a photographer. How do you create artistic pictures? Well, here are some guidelines that I follow. There are a lot more, but here are 5. Composition, lighting, focus and clarity, framing, highlights and shadows. The first and the last one are really the most important: composition, highlights, and shadows. But I'm going to talk about all of these in a moment as I go through my speech. The first and last are important because without composition, you don't really have a good picture. A composition of a picture is like an artist writing a book or a composer writing a symphony. Anything great needs planning if you're going to do the job. Highlights, photography is the same way. Highlights and shadows is the photographer recognizing the 2 most important elements in the toolbox. No picture exists without highlights and shadows. It is how the photographer incorporates these 2 entities into a picture is how we get great pictures. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this subject a little later. Composition does not need to be tedious, but it needs to be done to give the coherence to the picture. Now I'm going to show a series of slides. The first slide, you may know the gentleman in this picture, someone who has painted great speeches in your club. He and his wife, Amy, are enjoying the green outdoors and each other. This is a simple composition. Trees in the background, grass in the foreground. Nothing detracts from seeing the 2 of them, the smiles they have that they share with us in this picture. The next picture is a slide of a simple composition. It's a young girl receiving her first communion. You can almost see the glow in her eyes as she is at the moment of doing what she's been prepared for months. The next slide is another example of simple composition. It's a woman finishing a zip line section. She has a smile. She grabs tightly onto the safety rope so she doesn't fall off. The background is intentionally out of focus, but not obscure. It lets you know that you are in the jungles of Costa Rica. Another picture with a simple background is also simple composition. It's a large lizard. The focus is on the lizard. You can see the blue background. It outlines the lizard very clearly, but there are trees in the background. You're in a wooded area. Actually, this again is in Costa Rica. And you can see the lizard as it looks over its kingdom. The blue sky takes the focus towards you and towards the creature itself, the lizard. Just for fun, I took another picture of a lizard. He's looking at you as if to say, hey, don't bother me. The next slide shows a suspension bridge over a deep ravine, though the ravine's not shown. The artistic feature of this picture is the converging lines of the suspension bridge as it narrows in the distance. And you can see the hills, which are part of the jungle, but the tops of the hills are obscured by fog. So it takes your eye towards the jungle itself, but the people in the bridge give you size of the area that you're looking at. gives you a perspective. The next slide is a study of highlights and shadows, but I focused on a technique I learned in my teenage years, that if you reduce the size of the lens opening to a very small aperture, a point of light, a star, would appear. I was using my Nikon digital camera with a 220 millimeter telephoto lens for a picture of this eclipse in 2017. Timing is really important because the sun moves slowly, but it does move, and you can't make it go back. The next slide is a lack of much light to make a serene, calm picture. The darkened trees add a foreground that pulls your eyes towards the glimmering water and the low clouds in the distant hills. My last two slides are in different parts of the world. The first one is Costa Rica, a sunset. Here, the highlights and shadows keep your focus on the center of the picture, which is a small boat moving across the light of the setting sun. The silhouetted people on the shore, the clearly outlined palm trees are in clear focus and make a picture without distracting from the actual center of the picture, which is the boat moving in front of the sun. The last slide is a sunset in Washougal, Washington, my home. The trees have no color, but can plainly be seen. The clouds form a series of strips across the sky with a red of the sunset clearly and easily seen. Perhaps you've learned something from what I've just said, but the point of the speech is to let you recognize that the many things you already do for your great photographs is just common sense rules: composition, lighting, focus and clarity, framing, highlights, and shadows. While I may not have mentioned all the rules in this speech, all are important. And these are just the basic. Artists have so many other tools that they use to enhance their pictures, but these 5 pointers are a start. Now get ready, use your imaginations, see the opportunity in your viewfinder, find your picture as if you would like it hanging in your house. Remember that a picture is no more than highlights and shadows. Use them wisely.
Thank you, Leo.